Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Thank you for growing with Miss Gray today. Today's topic is something that's interesting. It's, are you thriving or are you surviving? Thriving versus surviving. Right now, many of you teachers may think that, how can you thrive with everything that is being put upon you? And some of you may think, how can I survive when I'm drowning? I'm alive still, but there's so much to be done. There's so much to do. So, thriving versus surviving. So, let's start with thriving. So, if you're thriving, that means you're giving extra time to other things. Like, for example, during your planning time, your conference time, you have time to go help a struggling teacher. You have time to go check on other things besides just sitting there taking a breath. But if you're surviving, you're sitting there taking a breath. You're breathing because you have to survive. So you're just sitting there like, whew, okay, I get to breathe now. Thriving versus surviving. So on one side you have surviving, on the other side you have thriving. Okay, so another component of thriving is if your data is already done. You just had the kids take some type of assessment, and you already know who's going to be in small group, what you're going to have to reteach, and that's already done like clockwork. You're thriving. You know exactly what to do and how to do it. So that is wonderful. Thriving versus surviving. Okay. If you're surviving, you're probably just now looking at your students' results and you're contemplating or thinking or processing, oh man, what am I going to do now? That's understandable for new teachers or just struggling teachers. That's understandable. So we have to think, what do we want to be? Do we want to be thriving, surviving, or do we want to be right there in the middle? What's right there in the middle? What category should we call that? So we're going to call right there in the middle, that's basically doing your job. Some of you may think doing your job is a lot. If doing your job you think is a lot, maybe we need to check on some things. Maybe ask a teacher to help us. You can go talk with your administration to say that you need help. Something like that. But if you're right there in that middle, which means you're a little bit more than surviving, but you're not exactly thriving. So you can go seek a colleague and to see how you can begin to thrive. Let's talk more about these components of thriving versus surviving. If you're thriving, people are going to come to you for help. That's one way to know that you are thriving. How do you do this? Ms. Gray, how do you do this? Ms. Gray, how do you do this? How are you able to do this? So you know you're thriving if people are coming to you for help. You know that you're thriving. And that's a good thing, because when you're thriving, there's no way to go but up. If you're thriving, there's no way to go but up. Now, if you're surviving, also there's no way to go but up. If you're surviving, you may not be doing your job to its potential, but you're surviving. You're surviving. If you're doing your job, you're doing more than surviving. You're doing your job. You're making sure that At every data meeting, you have your paperwork down. You have your all your stuff highlighted. For example, with the highlighters I showed you, you have all of your information there. You're able to desegregate your data and you know what's going on. That is someone who is thriving. You're thriving. You're also thriving. It's kind of a little bit in between. You're thriving if you go home and you don't turn your teacher brain off. And that can be a little bit misconstrued, because if you don't turn your teacher brain off, you do have to rest. I mean, you're not getting any rest or break from your schoolwork. But you do know that teachers have homework. I told my students several times, they would think, Ms. Gray, we have homework again? I'm like, everybody has homework. Everybody has homework. Teachers have homework. Everybody has homework who's in education. No matter what it is, you have homework. You have things to do. And if you do that, if you do your homework, you are thriving. You're thriving if you do your homework. If you don't, if you go home and that's it for you, okay. But if that's it for you, you may be surviving. You may be right there in the middle doing your job. So that's gonna come either way. But we all strive to thrive. We all want to thrive because we want to be that teacher of the year. We want to be that one that we see our colleagues flocking to for help. Not flocking to hear the gossip, get the tea. No, we're flocking to that teacher for help, for support, for understanding. Very good. And that's just what that is. So we don't really want to survive. We don't want to be in survival mode the whole school year. Let's think about the time right now. Right now, we are in between Thanksgiving break and our 2-week Christmas winter break, that holiday time. So you're going to feel like you're thriving. You have all this ready. You're ready for the next semester, semester 2. Or you may feel like, oh my goodness, I am drowning. It's the end of semester 1. And I don't know how I'm going to make it to semester 2. And that could be a feeling. That could be a feeling that many teachers have, old or new, with experience, without experience. That could be something that we think of. So what I'm thinking is that if you are surviving, that's okay, because the break's about to begin and you'll have time to rest. You'll have time to rest, free your mind, get you something to eat, actually sit down and eat. You know, teachers, we swallow our food, but actually have that time to sit down, go to a nice restaurant, keep your brain away from school. I know some teachers are okay with that. Some teachers are like, no, I have to get something done. I have to get things done. I don't want to come back on semester 2 and not have everything together. They're like, I have to have everything together. But if you are one of those teachers who can go ahead and just put everything aside during your break, do that. Do that. So that's interesting, and that's something else too. So if you want to thrive, will probably take at least a couple days during your break to maybe work on schoolwork, maybe get those last few papers graded, or get those last sheets of lessons done, or just think about that. You may watch some podcast on your time during that time, or create a podcast. I mean, several things that you can be doing. Several things. Awesome. So we talked about thriving, we talked about surviving, we talked about right in the middle. And that's doing your job. So that's clocking in on time, that's going to your duties, that making sure your grades are in, because you know parents look at those grades and they're like, oh, this teacher hasn't put grades in a couple weeks, and they're going to be asking their student, did y'all get work today? Did y'all do work? What did you get? And that's just one of those things. It happens in education. So that's truly interesting. So let's take a consensus. How do we feel like we're doing? Do you feel like you're thriving? Or do you feel like you're surviving? Or do you feel like in the middle, like you're just doing your job? You're doing what's asked of you. You're doing what your job description says. That's something to think about. That's something to think about. Think about, are you thriving, surviving, or doing your job? The bare minimum to get by. The bare minimum to get by. And there's nothing wrong with that. Trust me, there is nothing wrong with that. Because when you really think about it, what do you get from, bottom line, doing your job? What do you get from that? Besides, you know, your students loving you and giving you treats and all that stuff. Your students liking you is a big deal. But if you want to thrive, you're doing more than just your job description. And I would kind of argue to say that just being in the profession of teaching, just being in that profession, you're thriving as a person. You're thriving as a person, because that profession there, especially now, is really, really, really difficult. Really difficult. I bow to you, teachers. Yes, that is awesome that you're in the profession of right now where it's kind of difficult. And I know we've all been there at those times where we're like, oh, we have to meet. Oh, we have another meeting. Oh, but just think, let's say a couple days, you're going to be on a break. And if you're going to be on break, just put everything to the side if you're that type of person, because a lot of us may not be that type of person that can just put everything away and then just come back with the 2 weeks off and just jump right in. If you're surviving, you probably can do that. And if you're thriving, you're probably not going to do that, because that probably just doesn't fit your personality, your persona at all. Exactly. But yes, in the comments, I want you to let me know what type of teacher you think you are. Thriving teacher? Are you a surviving teacher? Or are you just a teacher who makes sure that they do their job? You're right in that box, right in those borders. Make sure you do your job. All right. Teaching is the profession that is very hard, difficult. You have a lot of factors to deal with. A lot of factors to deal with. However, you guys are awesome. You rock. You rock. Go, teachers, go.